Okay. Hello, welcome to the Rise Up with Margarita show. My name's Margarita, and if we haven't met yet, I help those conscious power leaders who are showing up on the new earth to lead their epic businesses, their spiritual businesses, activate light on the planet, and activate their power as well through power activation work and mentorship. And so excited to have you here. Every week on Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I lead a topic, a discussion on a topic that's really relevant to those leaders of the new earth who are ready to rise up right now. And so I welcome you, glad that you're here. And today's topic is something that I posted about a few days ago. It was actually one of those carousels, one of those things that you swipe through. And it was very interesting because it was on a topic that all light workers who have a spiritual business really need to take note of. And it's a big thing that gets missed because, to be honest, most light workers just focus on energy, right? They don't focus about, okay, how do I present this work to people? How do I share this with people? How do I make it known that I can help people with this, right? They're just really focused on the energy work and they don't really put any energy into, okay, how does that look like? And so that's one of the specialties, one of my superpowers, is really being able to ground in that frequency of, okay, what is this, this major, amazing energy, cosmic thing that I possess, right? This powerful blueprint of my lightworker purpose that I have, and how do I anchor that in onto the earthly plane so that it's not only grounded, but that it's actually a sustainable business that is abundant and grows and makes impact, right? And if you're not thinking about that, you really should be, because that is the really kind of, there's so many ways to get there, but it's super important that you actually embrace that aspect of you being a light worker, because without it, you're really not making any impact. Because, I get it about the whole energy thing. I do that every day myself. I work on the grids of Earth. I talk with Gaia every day. I do a lot of things with, cosmic frequencies and our galactic allies of light. But if you are really intending to make an impact in the world as a light worker, you get to actually implement your services by offering them, providing your offers and products of transformation, because I know there are many light workers who create products that really uplift the consciousness of humanity. And so if you've got some kind of service, whether you're like a spiritual guide or a spiritual coach, or, you're a yoga instructor, or, you're a Reiki practitioner, or you do energy work, implementing it on the earthly realm does look like, okay, how do I help people find me, right? And so that's super, super important. And so today's topic is the top 5 ways to embrace healthy energy, empath boundaries in your spiritual business. And this is super, super important because when light workers don't get this aspect, then a lot of things can happen. So I'll be sharing with you why healthy empath boundaries are important when you're a spiritually conscious entrepreneur, and also what happens if you don't have them, and then also what happens if you do, and then the top 5 ways to embrace those healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business, and some examples of how I do that, because I've already been implementing that for many years myself, and with that, I'm able to have that openness and that expansion and that space to really be that visionary that I'm here to be, right? And you get to express that as well and experience that in your life too as a spiritual conscious entrepreneur. So here's first of all, I'd love to get a show of hands. Is who here is really connected or not connected, or even has this awareness? Who here has the awareness that empath boundaries is important not only in your personal life, but also your business as well? Let me know in the comments below if this is resonating for you at all, if this is something that you're needing right now, because this is really important to really open into and grasp in order to really make your mark as a light worker in the world, right? So first of all, healthy empath boundaries, what does that look like? I'm not going to go into all the details too much on that, because if you are an empath, which is someone who picks up other people's energies, um, it's super, super important to make sure that you have healthy energy boundaries instead of just taking on everyone's energy, right? Instead of taking on everyone's feelings, all of their health issues and all of that, right? Because that is not an empowered way to be an empath. It's one way to exist as an empath, but it would not be an empowered one. When you are more empowered as an empath, you do have those healthy energy boundaries. And it's really basically this frequency of honoring who you are, honoring your own space, honoring your own frequency, and really diligently cultivating that. And part of energy cultivation is having healthy energy boundaries. So when you're an empath, you can really feel other people's energies. And if you're not empowered as an empath, you're going to see it as a curse, or you're going to feel like it's something that you're stuck with, or it's difficult. And the reality is, it's really not, right? Like, it's just literally having certain support things in place in your own life, and how you live through the world, to really feel empowered as one. So that's really, really important. Yeah, so I'm seeing some hands raised over here, really resonating with this topic about empath boundaries, particularly in business. One person is saying, yep, it's ongoing and learning. Yeah, and it's always a learning process, right? Whenever you're expanding into your power, it's never like some trophy you get at the end of the journey, right? Like, it's an ongoing expansion. And when you're a light worker who is committed to your growth as a light worker and to your impact, you're always going to be committed to that expansion. So when you don't have healthy energy boundaries, as an empath light worker, some of the things you'll experience, you'll feel burned out, you will feel fatigue. A lot of times fatigue in itself, like if you're not running yourself into the ground, that's one quick way to get into fatigue. And if you don't have healthy empath boundaries, you're probably doing that, right? But one big reason why light workers who are empaths feel fatigue is not because they're truly doing something that tires them out. In a way it is, right? What I'm talking about is when you're not really opening into your purpose, you're not embracing your purpose as a light worker, then, because I see this all the time with light workers, they do a day job that's like sucking out their soul, and they just stay there because they have this outdated perception that it gives you a steady paycheck, when, the reality is that whenever you're not embracing your purpose, it's one of the quickest ways to burn out, because you're literally taking your energy and focusing it into a dead end over and over and over. And then that's why light workers get tired, because they're putting their energy into something that is really like a dead end energetically. And so when you are doing that, you're not in your flow, and it can feel very exhausting. And so that's where that fatigue and exhaustion can come in a lot of times with light workers. So also, when you don't have these healthy empath boundaries, you will feel resentful. And that's kind of a given. It may not be something that you are aware of until your boundaries have been crossed, and you'll get resentful and like, why did this person do this or that and that kind of thing, when in actuality you didn't create any healthy energy boundaries, and maybe you didn't enforce them, right? So that's really, really important to open into and embrace, because feeling resentful is a quick way to block your creativity, is a quick way to block you from your power. Because anytime where you're at this denser frequency of like anger or resentment, or pain of some suffering of some sort, right, you are focusing your attention in a channel that does not that is not aligned with where you want to head. And when you do that, then you're going to get resentful. And so another thing that happens when you don't have those healthy energy boundaries in place is you'll lose confidence in yourself and what you're capable of. Because when you don't have these healthy energy boundaries, you're basically going to be kind of feeling, usually what happens when one doesn't have healthy energy boundaries, is that there will be this aspect of victimhood, right? Where, oh, this person hurt me, this, my happiness is responsible this person is responsible for my happiness kind of thing, or it's because of this person that I'm not able to attain what I really want to attain, or, like you'll basically blame others, right? And the reality is that when you are doing that, you do get into a place of victimhood, and there is no power in victimhood. In fact, it's the opposite of it, right? So when you don't have those healthy energy boundaries, that's what will happen, is that you'll just simply lose confidence in yourself, and you'll start doubting yourself a lot. And you will doubt what you're capable of, which, is probably one of the most tragic things of all, right? Out of this whole thing is that you then doubt what you're capable of. And whenever you doubt yourself, you're not going to go out and do anything, right? So that's the quickest way to not fulfill your purpose, right? Is just to not show up in it. And so that's what happens if you don't have healthy energy boundaries in place as an empath light worker. And on the converse side, when you practice healthy energy boundaries as an empath light worker, you will get a sustainable way of creating your empire of light, right? Super important. And, because if you don't have a sustainable way of making your business work, then you're just going to perceive it as hard. You're going to give up, and you're not going to fulfill your purpose, right? So having a sustainable way of creating and expanding your empire of light is super important. That's something that I teach my private clients how to do, because you can be all cosmic AF that you want to be, but if you're not grounding yourself and providing that in the world and doing it in a way that is sustainable and that helps you, it's going to feel, I'll say, it's going to feel really hard when it doesn't have to be, right? And I'm seeing some folks, yeah, one person is sharing, lack of empath boundaries is what catapulted me into my awakening. Yeah, it's a quick way to do that, because basically you'll have all these boundaries crossed that you didn't either insert or reinforce, and then all of a sudden now you're just like, in rage mode because everything has just been crossed. And at the same time, you get to put in those energy boundaries so that you don't need to get to a place of drama, right? When you're empowered as a light worker, you don't need drama in order to be a catalyst for either your own awakening or your expansion, because it can be a choice, right? It's definitely a choice. And if you don't kind of take those signs from the universe of like, hey, you might want to try this, and if you keep ignoring these signs, then it's going to come in like a big, kind of like truck running into the road kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you are consciously creating this, because otherwise you will eventually get conscious about it, but it may not be in the most gentle way. So I would advise choosing a more conscious path, because it'll just flow more easily for you. It'll be a lot less drama, and you'll find really the joy of the path. Even though no matter what path you choose, you can always find the joy no matter what you're experiencing. And I can say that with confidence, because no matter what you're experiencing in life, there's always a way to access your power. And so when you access and choose to have those healthy empath boundaries, you're really going to make a life and a business that is sustainable. And another thing that will happen, you'll have more time to focus on being the visionary that you are, because that's really important to realize that you are this visionary, right? You're not meant to just like slave away behind a computer or answer all your emails all by yourself, or all this other stuff, right? So I'm going to share in a little bit what these empath boundaries are going to look like. But before I do, I'm just going to share what else you experience when you do have those healthy empath boundaries. You'll also have more energy to enjoy your life and your business. You will have more flow in your life. You'll develop confidence, and you'll trust, because you'll trust yourself more. And the reason why you will trust yourself more is because you're really taking a stand for yourself. When you create and maintain and enforce healthy empath boundaries, you are actually teaching yourself that not only are you worthy, that you're worth it, that you deserve to be honored, right? You get to experience a life where you are happy, right? And you're in this kind of like experience of joy and expansion, right? And so when you have those healthy empath boundaries, you will cultivate that frequency of more confidence, of doubting yourself a lot less, of trying things out that are new, right? Because you're not going to be allowing that fear to stop you anymore, right? Also, another thing when you have those healthy empath boundaries is that you will fulfill your purpose. So, because that's what happens when you insert those healthy energy boundaries, you will be able to do more things that you love. You will be functioning and living your place from a place of alignment, and you'll be creating your business, your spiritual business, from a place of alignment as well. And so that is, you know, again, super important. I use that term a lot because I cannot stress enough how, if you do not have these healthy empath boundaries in place, not only will you create from this place of exhaustion, burnout, and scarcity, but whenever you function from that place and experience that and have that as your perception of how you're experiencing the world, you will guaranteed create more of that. However, the converse is also true of when you instill these healthy empath boundaries and you create a life that is aligned and in flow with what you're truly creating and what you are meant to expand into, then you will get more joy, you will make more impact in the world, you'll help more people. So I'm hoping this is landing for you and that you are resonating with this. Okay, let me know in the comments. And I'm going to go into now the top 5 ways to embrace healthy empath boundaries, and also how some examples of how I do that, right? So one of the things that I do is, and I'm going to actually share some bonus tips that I did not share in that carousel on social media a few days ago, but one of the first things that I do is that I set out specific days out of the week for client work and strategy calls. And that's super important to really create in your flow of your business, because if you don't, and you don't have healthy empath boundaries, someone gives you like a DM or says, hey, I would love to talk with you, and then you just like talk with them whenever is available for them or whenever they want it, right? Instead of like, oh, well, actually that day they chose is not convenient for me because I'd prefer to be with my family on that day, right? And whatever you accept and whatever you tolerate will set the standard. And so it's really important to realize that when you create only specific days where you do work with your clients or take your strategy calls, then, because really, honestly, the whole premise of healthy empath boundaries is you're teaching other people how to treat you. And if you have no boundaries, and if you let prospective clients dictate how you run your schedule, that is the fastest way to burn out, because you're going to want to accommodate everyone's schedules, and that may not always coincide with your ideal schedule yourself, right? So, one of the things I do with my private clients is really help them to reverse engineer what they want to create, right? Which is basically just saying, okay, this is the outcome I want. And then how do I make that happen, right? So some examples of doing this is, instead of being available all week, I am only available on specific days and times to do client work, to take strategy calls. And, because I used to make myself available throughout the entire week, but that burned me out real fast. And so empowered light leaders lead from filling their cup first with an aligned schedule. If you don't have an aligned schedule, one that is totally aligned with what you want to create and aligned with your purpose, then make sure you get on that. That's why it's number 1. So I'm seeing a comment here. I love this boundary discussion is very awesome. Thanks. You're welcome. It's so like, I don't want to overuse it, but it's super important, right? So number 2, I consciously schedule off time during the week. And that is in addition to the weekend. So I'm not even including the weekend. I'm talking about during the work, like on the work days, I schedule in additional off time. I even have what's called flex time, which is where I take a certain amount of days off at the end of every month. And that's called my flex time, right? So, I can use that however I want, whether it be go on vacation or have a staycation, or, as I was doing recently, because I was recovering from that surgery that I told you about from like 2 months ago now. I used that for recovery, right? I just rested. And so you do, but you get to do whatever you want, right? So that's a very important way to start really having healthy empath boundaries. Make sure you're scheduling time off, because if you are just like, one thing about being a spiritually conscious entrepreneur is that if you don't watch it, you will just be working the entire day into the night, right? And I see that big mistake a lot with a lot of light workers or a lot of spiritually conscious entrepreneurs. And one of the reasons why they have burnout is because when you're an entrepreneur who has a spiritually based business, you're going to have a lot of ideas, right? But that doesn't mean that you just flow on those ideas all day, every day, right? Like you can actually just, one thing that I do anyway, if you have a journal, you can put it in a journal. What I tend to do is I put it in notes, because on my iPhone, and I just say, okay, this is my idea, or if I want to schedule it, I'll put it immediately into my calendar, and so that like it's out of my brain. It's not like congesting up my brain with all these ideas, right? Like I either, put it into my schedule somehow that I'm going to implement it, or I make a note, or if it's like an idea for a reel, I have actually a note just for ideas for reels, right? So I just quickly organize it so it gets out of my brain and I can just focus on other stuff, right? It's so important. Hey, Alfie, good to see you. She says, oh my God, yes, we need our own time clock to abide by. Yeah, so for some folks, it's like, okay, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., that is my dedicated work time. I shut all my phone off. I don't schedule anything during that time. Like that is for whatever creation, making something for your community, whether that be content or something like that, right? And for me, it's more like around like 12 to 5-ish, something like that, because that's a schedule that works for me. And so, yeah, and I don't veer off. I don't make any exceptions unless there's like a one-time exception thing, and I make people aware of that, not because I'm trying to be a bitch about it, but this is like something where you get to not take on other people's disappointments, right? Because if you do, that's one whole thing of having healthy empath boundaries in place, right? If you don't have healthy energy boundaries, you will take on other people's disappointments. And I am going to speak into that in a little bit. But in regards to consciously scheduling off time during the week, in addition to the weekend, you literally get to put aside this old paradigm belief of hustle yourself into the ground, white knuckle everything, just work yourself to the bone, right? Like that is very old paradigm. The new paradigm where we are already here, it's already here, right? If you're willing and ready to embrace it, is being in your flow, creating a sustainable way of doing your business, and it's really about having a rejuvenated frequency, of having the space to create. And if you are scheduling conscious off time in your schedule as a spiritually conscious entrepreneur, you make more room for all the things that matter, right? Not to say that, of course, your business doesn't matter, because of course it does. But everything gets to have space. Everything gets to be accomplished. If you're, because most people Do not say, I want to create this business because I want to work harder, right? Like usually people are like, I want to create this business because I want to help people, or I want to have more time with my family, or, that kind of thing, right? So it's about what is the important thing in your life and creating your business schedule around it, right? Instead of vice versa, which is very much the old employee mindset, because that's what we were all taught, right? If you went to some kind of conventional school, then you are taught like basically you're taught to be an employee eventually, right? Instead of being a leader. They don't teach you that in school. They teach you how to be an employee and how to be a follower. And so it's really up to you to embrace your destiny, which does entail you leading at the forefront, right? Number 3, another way to embrace healthy empath boundaries based on, something that I wanted to share with you is I only work with aligned clients. So and this one actually kind of ruffled the feathers of some people, when I had posted this, because they're like, oh no, I want to help everyone. And it's like, here's the thing about that. Whenever you say, I want to help everyone, you actually help no one. And the reason why is because when you show up with your content on social media or with your emails or whatever you're putting out in the world, and you say, oh yeah, I just want to help everyone, guess what happens when you say that? Then your ideal client does not know if what you're sharing is for them, because they're going to be confused. They're going to be like, well, if it's for everyone, well, what about me? I might have a kind of a special circumstance because, I'm a mom who's a light worker, or maybe, I'm at the beginning of my path as a light worker, or, maybe she doesn't serve, people like me, whatever the curiosity is there, right? So basically what you're doing is you're creating confusion for your ideal client. And anyone who is confused by what you share will immediately swipe, will immediately say, okay, well, I don't know if that, that's not related to me, right? Because they can't see themselves in what you're sharing. That's why I'm super specific about who I'm calling in. I'm not calling in, like someone, let's say, well, I don't know, because it can look like many different ways, but the whole thing is that I only work with aligned clients who are those light workers who are either already a spiritually conscious entrepreneur or who are interested in being that, who are ready to commit to being a leader of the new earth, right? Who are, they've already done some internal work. They're no longer functioning from a place of trauma, right? Like they've got their shit together, basically. Doesn't mean that they need to be perfect. But what I'm saying is that my aligned clients are those who've already done some internal work, who've already healed a lot of their traumas and their pain, and they're ready to upgrade and really embrace that, right? And the reason why is because my work is super deep and it's super powerful, and it's also very quick. And so if you're just kind of like at the beginning stage of like even just realizing that you're a spiritual person in general, that said, that type of person could also be aligned depending on how they're showing up. So it really depends. And so you get to choose to work with aligned clients. I would highly recommend it anyway. If you still say, oh no, Margarita, I'm going to help everyone, then, good luck with getting your messaging out there. Good luck with landing your content and what you're communicating and what you're expressing out there in the world with your ideal client, because they're going to just be like, I don't know if they're talking about me. I don't know if she's talking about me. Maybe she means someone else, and the bottom line is a confused mind never buys, right? And at the end of the day, you're also selling your services or your products. And if they're confused, they're just going to swipe and they're just going to keep going, assuming that, well, I don't know what this person's talking about, right? So you want to really be super specific. And another thing too that I also heard around being specific with who you're serving is, back in the day when I first started, I was like, oh, I want to help everyone, right? And then the types of people who came into my door were everyone, including the people who didn't want to do the work, right? Those aren't my people. Because, but I only discovered that after like working with a lot of misaligned clients, right? So you can either learn the hard way of like actually experiencing that, and either way is fine, right? Because either way you're going to learn. But if you want to kind of do it with less drama and less tragedy, you can consciously choose like, hey, I get to like really hone in with who I'm specifically serving, and which really stems from what is your purpose, right? And for all those light workers who say I don't know what my purpose is, you do, like you all do, right? You, like all light workers, know what their purpose is. You incarnated on this planet knowing, and the only reason you say you don't know what it is because you're afraid to do it. So there's a fear component there that you get to overcome, transcend. But the reality is that once you're really connected with your purpose, then you start to really connect with who you're truly, truly serving, and who you can really serve at a high, high level, right? And then go for it. Create your content, your emails, your social media posts, your reels, whatever, aligned with that ideal person that would bring you joy to work with, right? So it's important to hold integrity. And when you have your own standards of these are the types of people I work with, the ironic thing is that the more focused you are with who your client is, the faster they're going to find you. Because if you're all vague and like general and like, oh, I'll help everyone, then that's just going to land on no one, because, except like someone who doesn't know what they want, right? And so that would be number 3. Something that I do, I only work with aligned clients, and those are the reasons why. Number 4, I don't take on other people's reactions about me personally. And this is a huge one for a lot of empaths, especially if you're still learning how to be empowered as an empath light worker, is that it will be difficult to have a sustainable business if you are constantly taking on other people's feelings, you're constantly afraid of hurting other people's feelings or disappointing them or whatever, right? Because that's part of what business is. That's part of what having a spiritual business is. And really, honestly, it's a part of life. There will be people who will just not like you, who will not jive with you, who might think you're full of crap, right? But that's not your job to take on their disappointments or their reactions to your energy. In fact, that's part of one of the biggest reasons why you want to have healthy energy boundaries as an empath light worker, because then you can really share with people from a place of integrity, from holding your own, from knowing who you are, from feeling more confident as a result of having and holding that container of energy of integrity for yourself. And then also you will be doing the same for your clients, because that's one thing I definitely do is, you want to hold that space of integrity for your clients. Yes, and I'm seeing the comment here, that's the biggest lesson, you cannot own others' business. Yeah, and that definitely is important when you have a business. So you want to make sure you're doing that. Number 5, in addition to clearing my personal energy, I do energy clearings in my business. So, when I have my mentorship containers, I really hold the energy and the frequency within that container, within that energy container. And so I can immediately, quickly sense when anything is off, and then I can adjust accordingly, right? Or if there's something that's entered in, I can clear that out immediately, something that doesn't belong there. And that's just only with, my clients, with my private clients. Another thing that you can do is, when it comes to your own personal energy clearings, it's important to do whatever works for you. I personally love sage. I use Palo Santo, other sacred herbs, waters, sound, chimes, bells, crystals, intention, and ritual. In fact, I do it every day because it depends, where you're at, what you're doing during the day. For me, I do a high level of work every single day. And so it's important for me to feel super clear. And I take care of that in the evening, right? And also when I wake up. There are my practices that I do in the morning that assist with that. And so one thing that I also do that some light workers may do, if it's not, it's something that'll be new for you. But I also clear my tech. So like my mobile devices, my laptop, my desktop, for instance, it's really important to clear out the energy of that stuff because it fuels a lot of energies themselves, right? Like my phone, my desktop, my laptop, I do sage those things, right? Or a Palo Santo, or I do some energy clearing through some ritual around my tech. And that's really important too, because it's there's a lot of people out on social media, and not all of them are super responsible with their energy. And same thing with being in New York City. Like I live smack dab in the middle of New York City. So I'm surrounded by many, many people all the time, right? Like I'm literally amongst all these different hotels and everything in New York City. So there's a lot of kinds of influx of energies and people and all that stuff that come in. And so like I actually really honed really quickly my empath boundaries because, you know, like I'm around people all the time. So it's very important. Yes, I'm seeing here. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one who does this every day, cleaning my personal space, utilizing all I have available. Yeah, well, if you're doing energy work, you should be clearing yourself every single day, like at the very least once a week. But if you are actively doing energy work, it should be every day, honestly, because there's a lot of interferences, I'll call them, that are infiltrating, especially and particularly the lightworker community, especially, you know, kind of zeroing in on those light workers who are not taking ownership of their power, right? So there are all kinds of transmissions going on. I'll just put it that way, right? A lot of transmissions that we can't even see with the naked eye, that are, you know, ushering into the planet. And some of them are beautiful and lovely, like these cosmic rays coming in from the cosmos, from the universe, right? Coming in to help us upgrade, and even those codes from Solaris that are here to help us upgrade. And there are also other energies that are influxing here that are not, you know, coming in to serve you. I'll just put it that way. So it's important to always clear yourself every day and make sure that you're really embracing your power. So that's important too. And so I have 2 bonus tips. And before I share that, let me know if any of these tips have been helpful for you. So far, I've mentioned 5 top 5 ways of embracing healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business and some examples of how I do it. And if you're just joining us now, today's topic is the top 5 ways to embrace healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business. And then I've shared, if you don't have them, what happens, and if you do have them and practice them, what happens. And so far I've shared 5 of these top ways to really be clear in your energy and really cultivate healthy energy boundaries in your spiritual business as well. And so one of these other tips is that you get to create systems in your business, right? And you don't need to be like you don't need to be super, super advanced in order to do this, right? But I do recommend, if you are selling anything, whether it be a service or a product, as a spiritually conscious entrepreneur, as a light worker who's an empath, you want to have systems in place, right? And what I mean by that is you want to have some policies in place, you know, definitely like a cancellation policy kind of thing. Even you want to have like standards of practices, or otherwise known as SOPs. And I won't get too into the nitty gritty, right? But these are some of the things that I help my private clients really embrace and get some guidance and support around, because when you start implementing some of these standards of practices and these systems, you can just let things flow on their own, right? Like one of the things that I do is that there's actually, in addition to my deeper work that I do with my private clients, is I also have some passive income, right? Like there are packages that I have, and you know, there's just some kind of daily, sometimes daily income that comes in passively as a result of putting in some of these systems. And they don't, again, need to be complex or complicated. They can be just super simple. But, if you really want to have things just kind of streamlined, rather than recreating the wheel every single time something shows up, you can actually just create standards where it's like, okay, this person is coming in and wants to do this. This is how we approach that, right? Or even contracts is part of having healthy energy boundaries. It's very interesting because I get all kinds of reactions from light workers whenever they realized that they would be signing a contract in order to do deeper work with me, right? Like some of them feel like, oh my God, I'm so glad you have this. I feel so much safer now, right? Like I've actually heard that. And other people, especially those who don't practice healthy empath boundaries themselves, they're just like, oh wow, you're about that, right? You need to have contracts. And it's like, yeah, it's called business. If you're not having any systems, if you're not having any contracts, you're not even having any consent forms or anything like that, then you're just leaving yourself up for all kinds of possibilities that may not be in your highest good. So that's really important, is having these systems and like expectations of, protocols, basically, right? Having policies and protocols. And so that's one of the bonus tips. And then another one is batching and automation. And this is more when you are really showing up in a bigger way, and you have more of an email list. And that's really the important thing of having social media, not to become popular, not to have a lot of followers, not to get a lot of likes. It's to connect with people. And then to also build your email list, because here's the thing, social media is awesome. I love it. And at the end of the day, it's not yours, right? It doesn't belong to you. Your email list, though, does. And so no one can touch that. So that's something that's really important, is to batch the creation of certain things. For me, I used to batch a lot more reels, but now I tend to prefer kind of creating them more in the moment, just because that's a personal preference. And also that's a thing too, is when you're an empowered light worker, you're always testing things out, seeing how things are landing. Are your people enjoying it? Are they able to see it? That kind of thing. So it's about trying things out too, testing and seeing if they work, if they help to streamline things, or it just makes things more complicated, but you don't know until you try, right? And so batching, I do more batching and automation when it comes to my emails. And, meaning like I create a bunch of them at one time, and then I have my assistant schedule it out, right? So this is really important. All these things, I know it sounds super meticulous, but it's really not. It's just about like taking a small thing that you can do at the moment right now, and then just building on top of that. That's how you really do it, is like you just start and then you just start building it, right? So these are some of the ways to embrace healthy empath boundaries. And my very last bonus tip I'm going to share is that you outsource in an aligned way, right? Meaning that you don't do everything yourself, right? You focus on the things that will move the needle because you're the visionary, and all the stuff that is like the emails, the meticulous other things, right? Anything that takes a lot of time that is not really in your zone of genius, outsource that. And that's what I do, and that's why I'm so super grateful for Rebecca and the rest of my team. I have other folks on my team, and it's super important to have that, because if you're doing everything yourself, that's another way to be super exhausted and to get burned out really fast. And you deserve to have your business be streamlined and to really make an impact from a place where you're creating from a lot of space, right? So I hope that helps. Let me know which of these, I think I gave 5 tips, but then I gave 3 bonus tips. Which of these tips are really helping you right now? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear. And I'm open to taking questions about this topic, specifically about embracing healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business. Let me know if you have any questions on that. And if this has really inspired you, or you're ready to really open up into, okay, I'm a light worker, I'm an empath, I'm ready to commit to having a more powerful impact in the world and building a type of business, a spiritual business that really is in alignment and flow, and you want some deep guidance on that. I do have long-term mentorship programs as well as power activation offerings. And so if you're interested in really upgrading as a light worker and you would love some of that deep heart-centered guidance, being that you're a deeply heart-centered light worker as well, then I invite you to book your call with me using the link in my bio. So just wanted to share that and make sure you're aware of that. So no questions about having healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business? Or is this stuff you already knew? I'm really curious, because the thing is that, healthy empath boundaries are super important to have personally. You should have that, no if, buts, or whats, right? You should really be opening into that frequency for yourself, because you deserve to honor your energy and to honor your light, right? And then that also goes with having your spiritual business, really making sure that that gets served as well. Okay, I'm seeing a question here. A pendant or a talisman I can wear while I perform Reiki that will help me from taking on the client's energy too much. So it depends. That's a good question. And more light workers should be asking that question, because there are so many ways, and to really empower yourself, protect your energy. And I would go check out all of them, right? There's actually a way to protect yourself. There are so many different ways, right? But having crystals, specific crystals on your body, will actually inform your energy field about what the frequency gets to be, right? So it depends what crystal you're using, but one of the most powerful crystals that you can use as a light worker who's doing a lot of energy work with clients is black tourmaline. Black tourmaline is highly protective, especially if you're working with a lot of clients who have a lot of attachments, if you know what I mean, so that you don't accept or take into your energy field any of their stuff, right? Black tourmaline is great. I've worn that when I used to be at a harm reduction agency. I used to work there. I think it might have been like 13, like maybe like 12, 13 years ago now. I used to work at a harm reduction agency, and some of you who have been following me might already know this story. But basically, it's a harm reduction agency where I would provide acupuncture and Reiki to clients who came into what we were calling the sanctuary. And excuse me. And so one of the things, though, is that because it's a harm reduction agency, sometimes some of the people who would be coming in to receive treatment would be using, right? Using substances. And whenever you do, you're basically checking out, right? And you make yourself an open vessel for something else to check in, which often happens with addiction, right? And so the black tourmaline that I wore was super helpful. So that, because when you look into the eyes of those who are checked out and something else is looking back at you, that can be really interesting. And you want to make sure that you are clear in your energy field, number one, and then number two, that you are, calling in your protection from your team of light. And one way to do that is through amulets. And it can, it can be like a pendant, right? Like this one is sugar light, and sugar light is a great psychic protection for empaths. So that's something, it's not something you find every day. And then the one on the top is tanzanite. And so, I tend to get some of these, the crystals that usually tend to be more aligned with me are not They're not as well known as, let's say, amethyst or rose quartz, but of course all of the crystals in the crystal world are super, super helpful, and you get to choose one that is helpful to you, that you totally resonate with, because maybe it's something more like onyx or something more like obsidian. Obsidian is great. I actually have an obsidian blade that I do cord cuttings with because I'm a medicine woman. And so, but there are some wonderful ways to wear it on your body. Like I said, you can use it as a pendant. You can use it as earrings. These are turquoise, right? I mean, everything I wear is always helpful. Like, it's always there to help me in some way, right? So, and turquoise resonates with the throat chakra, right? So it's really important to, take those crystal allies that you need in order to help yourself. I actually have an article on my website, alcantaracupuncture.com, of crystals for protection. So if you want to check that out, you can. I also have another article on protecting yourself from psychic vampires in the concrete jungle. Excuse me, because that was something I had to learn. It was kind of like a boot camp when I first moved here, like over my halftime of a lifetime ago. So, okay, you're welcome. And so, was that all the questions? Was that all the questions you had on healthy empath boundaries for your spiritual business? And I'll give you a few moments just in case some of you are like typing it in right now. And in the meantime, I'm taking my nettle infusion, because that's one thing I do is like, I just always am nourishing myself with herbs, with, all kinds of amazing things. So it's very important to do that for yourself as well. Okay, so it looks like we're all set with all the questions on this topic. I hope this was helpful to you. Today, if you're just popping in now, today's topic was the top 5 ways to embrace healthy empath boundaries in your spiritual business. Because if you are an empath lightworker and you're showing up in the world and you're providing services, you have a spiritual business, right? If you're not charging anything, then that's not a business. So this is really for those spiritual business owners who really want to create a sustainable way of creating their empire of light, because that's really what it is. Yes, I'm seeing one question just pop up just now. I love the idea of getting assistance. Do you have virtual assistants? And so, yeah, if you actually were here at the beginning or earlier on, I did mention that I have an assistant, and she is virtual. She actually lives in Maryland. It was important for me to have someone who's East Coast, since I'm in the East Coast as well. It was important for me to have someone in my time zone. But, you can have someone who's not in your time zone, So, yeah, it's really important to get that support, to build your team, and at the very least, get an assistant, right? So that you're not the one who's answering all the phone calls, who's answering all the emails, responding to all the stuff, so that you can like really focus on your zone of genius, which is creating and manifesting your vision. So I hope that was helpful. Okay. And if you want to check this out, if you've just popped in and are just joining us now, there is a replay that you can check out. It will be in the videos tab in Instagram as well as on Facebook. And make sure you check it out, because if you are an empath lightworker and you are providing your services or making products for people that are really helping to upgrade the world, you deserve to be protected in your energy, to honor your energy, honor your frequency. And that happens not only on the personal level, but also on the business level, because you get to have an empire of light that is sustainable, that you're aligned with, that is in flow. So I hope that served you today. Much love, light, and power.